What if Meghan Markle's greatest scandal wasn't her clashes with the royal family, the public feuds, or even the relentless lawsuits? What if the deepest, darkest shadow hanging over her carefully curated life was something far more personal? Whispers of a secret child, a rumor buried for years, and now seemingly confirmed in the most shocking way imaginable by her own mother, Doria Ragland. Yes, you heard that right. The very woman who has stood by Meghan in silence for decades. The one person who has kept her mouth shut while Thomas Markle and Samantha Markle shouted to the press, has finally spoken. And what she said was enough to send shockwaves through the media and ignite the very rumors Meghan has fought her entire adult life to silence. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Let's pause here for a moment. Imagine the tension. Imagine the weight of secrets carried for years. The kind of silence that gnaws at your conscience until one slip of the tongue, one careless phrase, unleashes an avalanche you can't stop. That's what Doria did. She didn't scream. She didn't rant. She didn't write a book. She whispered something, and the world is still reeling. Now, why does this matter? Why should we care? Haven't Meghan and Harry already drowned in enough controversy? Why add another scandal to the pile? Because this one isn't about royal etiquette, broken traditions, or media wars. This is about identity, about truth, about whether everything we thought we knew about Meghan Markle has been one long, carefully constructed illusion. And here's the catch. This isn't a story that began yesterday. These rumors, these whispers, have been around for years. They appeared in tabloid columns, in half-forgotten interviews, in snide comments from family members. They were dismissed as conspiracy theories, as jealous digs, as cruel inventions. But if even a fraction of it is true, if Doria's words are taken at face value, then we are looking at a scandal that could eclipse every single controversy Meghan has ever been a part of. Think about it. Meghan built her brand around reinvention. Actress, activist, duchess, mother of two. But what if there was another role she once played that she's hidden from the world? A mother before Archie. A mother before Lilibet. A secret life that never made it into the glossy photo shoots, the Netflix specials, the carefully staged podcasts. And here's where it gets uncomfortable. If this is true, if there was a child, hidden, erased, tucked away somewhere, what does that mean for Meghan's public narrative? What does it say about the authenticity she sells to the world? And what does it reveal about the fractured relationship between Meghan, her father Thomas, and her half-siblings, who have long accused her of being a master manipulator of her own story? I want you to imagine the scene when Doria finally spoke. Cameras flashing, journalists leaning in, a quiet pause, and then words no one expected to hear. She didn't deny it. She didn't laugh it off. She didn't say the rumors were absurd. Instead, she admitted that the whispers weren't entirely false. Let that sink in. Not entirely false. Not entirely untrue. A mother's carefully chosen words, or maybe not so carefully chosen, that implied there was something there. Something to all the gossip Meghan has worked so desperately to bury. But let's rewind. How did we even get here? How did a rumor that once floated around the edges of Meghan's life, a whisper most people dismissed, explode into the center of global attention? To answer that, we have to go back. Back to Meghan's early years. Back to the strange gaps in her timeline. Back to the family members who hinted at secrets no one wanted to believe. You see, Meghan's story has always had holes. Periods where no one quite knew what she was doing. Gaps in her biography that never added up. Friends and acquaintances who said she disappeared for months at a time. And while the official narrative tells us she was busy chasing acting gigs, waitressing, or studying, others whispered a darker possibility. That Meghan was living another life, one she scrubbed from history. Now here's the thing. If this child exists, or once existed, Meghan didn't raise it in the way she presents herself raising Archie and Lilibet. That's what makes this scandal so explosive. Because it suggests abandonment. It suggests secrets buried so deep that even the royal family, with all their power and influence, may not have fully known what they were welcoming into their gilded halls. And it's not just speculation. Doria's words hit differently because she's always been silent. Think about it. Thomas Markle has spilled his guts in endless interviews. Samantha Markle has screamed from the rooftops. Both have been accused of bitterness and jealousy. But Doria? Doria has played the role of the loyal, supportive, silent mother. She's been Meghan's one true constant, which is why her decision to break silence is seismic. So the question becomes, why now? Why speak now, after years of silence? Was it an emotional slip? Was she pressured? Or was this part of a calculated move? Because if Doria chose her words deliberately, it means she was sending a message. And if it was a slip, it means the truth was simply too heavy to carry any longer. Either way, the impact is the same. The rumors are alive again, and this time they have a pulse. And let me ask you this. If you were in Meghan's position, what would you do? Would you fight tooth and nail to bury the story, to deny it until your last breath? Or would you finally admit the truth, hoping the world might forgive you? Because here's the irony. Meghan has built her brand on authenticity, on speaking her truth, on exposing the lies of the monarchy, the cruelty of the press, the racism she endured. She has demanded honesty from others, while possibly hiding the most explosive truth of all. And this matters not just to gossip columnists or curious fans. It matters to the monarchy, to the legitimacy of Archie and Lilibet's place in the royal line, to the financial empire Meghan and Harry have built, selling their lives as a package deal. If there's another child out there, hidden, abandoned, unacknowledged, it calls everything into question. Let me paint a picture for you. Meghan and Harry sit in Montecito, surrounded by wealth, cameras, lawyers, and brand deals. Across town, Doria Ragland lets slip a line that cracks the foundation of everything they've built. One mother's words versus an empire of silence. One accidental admission versus years of careful image control. Do you see the stakes now? This isn't just about Meghan. This is about the collapse of an entire narrative. But here's where the story twists again. Doria didn't outright confirm the existence of a child. She didn't provide proof, a name, or a photo. She gave us something far more tantalizing: doubt. She confirmed enough to spark fire, but not enough to extinguish it. And that's where the danger lies. Because in the absence of clarity, speculation breeds. Rumors multiply. Questions spiral out of control. And trust me, they are spiraling. Every journalist is digging. Every critic is sharpening their knives. Every fan is asking themselves, what else has Meghan hidden? So, we're left with the biggest cliffhanger of all. What happens next? Will Meghan finally confront the rumor head-on, risking everything? Will the press uncover evidence that forces her hand? Or will Doria say more, unleashing a storm her daughter cannot contain? Because one thing is certain, once a mother speaks, the silence is broken forever. And what came after Doria's words would change everything, and no one saw it coming. The whispers began long before Meghan Markle ever stepped onto the global stage as a duchess. Long before the royal wedding, before the tiaras, before the Netflix cameras followed her every move. The whispers started in hushed tones in Hollywood circles, in half-forgotten conversations at casting calls, in the kinds of private exchanges people dismiss as gossip, until suddenly, years later, they reappear with a vengeance. And what were these whispers about? Not Meghan's ambition, not her attitude, not her hunger for fame. Those were obvious. The whispers were about something far more personal, something secretive, something so shocking that no one dared speak it too loudly. That maybe, just maybe, Meghan Markle had once been a mother before the world ever knew her as one. Stop for a moment. Let that sink in. Imagine the power of a rumor like that. Imagine how it would spread. Not like wildfire, too dangerous, too scandalous, but like a slow-burning ember, passed hand to hand, whispered behind closed doors. Always there, always lingering, waiting for the right moment to catch fire. Now here's the question. Where did it come from? How did such a rumor take root? To answer that, we need to go back to Meghan's early life, long before Archie and Lilibet, long before Prince Harry. Back to when Meghan was still climbing the ladder, desperate to make her way into Hollywood. Those years were chaotic. Meghan was juggling auditions, hustling waitressing jobs, networking at industry events. But those years were also full of strange silences, gaps in her timeline, periods where no one seemed to know exactly where she was or what she was doing. Former acquaintances claimed she would vanish for months, then reappear with a new story, a new hustle, a new plan. And it's in those gaps that the whispers first began. Some said Meghan had gotten involved in a serious relationship as a teenager or young adult. Others claimed she had once been deeply entangled with an older man whose identity has never been fully confirmed. And then came the most shocking suggestion of all, that during one of these missing periods, Meghan had become pregnant. Now, pause for a second. Ask yourself, does that sound impossible? Or does it sound like the kind of secret someone with Meghan's determination and drive might go to great lengths to hide? Because here's what makes it compelling. These rumors never quite died. They faded into the background, yes, but they always lingered, waiting to be reignited. And reignited they were. Years later, when Meghan's name hit the global headlines thanks to her whirlwind romance with Prince Harry, journalists began digging. That's what they do. They scoured her history. They tracked down old classmates, friends, ex-boyfriends, teachers. They wanted dirt. And what did they find? Those same gaps. Those same strange silences in her timeline. And suddenly, whispers of a hidden child no longer seemed like fringe gossip. They seemed like a question worth asking. But there was another twist. It wasn't just strangers talking. Meghan's own family began hinting at secrets. Thomas Markle, estranged but outspoken, gave interviews full of contradictions. Samantha Markle hurled accusations that Meghan was manipulative and deceitful. While neither came out and said the words hidden child, their venomous suggestions painted a picture of someone capable of burying truths to protect her image. And in gossip, suggestion is everything. Think about it. If enough people hint, if enough timelines don't add up, if enough friends say, oh, she disappeared for a while, the pieces start forming a puzzle. And it doesn't matter if the puzzle is complete, the public fills in the blanks. Let's step into the shoes of those early gossipers. Picture a casting assistant at a Hollywood audition in the early 2000s, whispering to another, didn't she vanish for a while? Didn't she have, or a former classmate saying, we lost touch for months. She never explained why. Individually, they're nothing. But stitched together, they form the skeleton of a scandal. And here's where the story takes a darker turn. These whispers weren't only confined to Hollywood. They began to bleed into tabloid columns. Fringe outlets ran suggestive headlines. Online forums picked up threads about Meghan's missing years. But just as quickly as these stories appeared, they disappeared. Pulled down. Erased. Threatened with lawsuits. Why? Was it because they were baseless, defamatory, dangerous lies? Or was it because they were hitting too close to a truth Meghan desperately wanted to keep buried? This is where things get interesting. Meghan, even before she became a royal, had a reputation for being litigious, protective of her image, quick to call in lawyers. And it worked. Most gossip sites backed off, most whispers remained whispers. But anyone paying close attention could see the pattern. The rumors would surface, and Meghan's team would stamp them out with unusual ferocity. Now, ask yourself this. Do you think someone fights that hard against a rumor if it's truly ridiculous? Or do they fight that hard because even a whiff of truth could destroy everything? Here's another layer. The timeline of Meghan's life has been presented to us in neat, polished packages. High school, Northwestern, brief acting career, Suits, then Prince Harry. But if you look closer, there are gaps. Months unaccounted for. Periods explained away with vague references to auditions or travel. And those periods line up eerily with the very rumors in question. Could those months have been when Meghan carried a child? Could that be why she disappeared? And if so, what happened to that child? This is where speculation runs wild. Some say adoption. Some say the child was raised quietly by someone else in California. Some claim the child never survived. No one knows for sure. But the ambiguity is what fuels the fire. And let me put this question directly to you. If there was nothing to hide, why didn't Meghan simply laugh it off? Why didn't she say, this is absurd, I never had a secret child, let's move on? Instead, silence. Legal threats. Gaps. But the most damning part of all this? The rumors didn't die because of Meghan's denials. They died because people stopped talking. Because lawsuits silenced journalists. Because the trail went cold. Until now. Until Doria Ragland. Because what Doria did, whether intentional or not, was breathe life back into the whispers. She didn't say, this is nonsense. She didn't defend her daughter. She didn't shut it down. She admitted that the whispers weren't entirely false. And with that one line, she turned a forgotten rumor into a global headline. Now here's the cliffhanger. What exactly did Doria mean? Was she confirming that Meghan had a hidden child? Was she hinting at something else entirely? Or was this the first crack in the armor of silence Meghan has built around her past? Because if Doria spoke once, who's to say she won't speak again? And what came next would send Meghan into full-blown panic, because her mother's slip wasn't the only revelation. For years, Doria Ragland was the enigma at the center of Meghan Markle's life. Think about it. While Thomas Markle was giving endless interviews, while Samantha Markle was writing venomous books and hurling accusations, while Meghan herself was parading across the world stage, there was one figure who remained quiet, silent, untouched by the chaos. That figure was Doria. She didn't write a tell-all. She didn't sit down for a lucrative TV interview. She didn't sell her story to tabloids. No, Doria stayed in the background, loyal to her daughter, always calm, always smiling, never feeding the press. And in doing so, she became the one person in Meghan's life who was untouchable. That silence made her powerful, mysterious, almost saint-like in the Meghan saga. She was the mother who didn't betray, the parent who stood by her daughter's side when everyone else seemed to crumble. For years, the public saw her as Meghan's rock. But silence is a dangerous thing. Silence builds pressure. Silence holds secrets. And when someone who has been silent for decades finally decides to speak, or slips and reveals something they never meant to, the impact is nuclear. That's exactly what happened when Doria Ragland broke her silence. Let's rewind and paint the picture. Imagine a carefully staged event. Doria attending a community gathering, perhaps a charity function, where cameras are present, but the atmosphere feels casual. Journalists are scattered among the crowd, microphones at the ready, waiting for sound bites. Doria is calm, as always, smiling politely, giving little away. Then a question comes. A pointed one. About Meghan. About the whispers. About the hidden child. Everyone expects her to shut it down. To dismiss it with a laugh, or with a sharp, "That's nonsense." That's what she's done for years. Avoid, deflect, stay neutral. But this time, something is different. Maybe it's the stress. Maybe it's the years of carrying the burden of silence. Maybe it's just one of those moments where truth slips out by accident. Whatever the reason, Doria leans slightly forward, lowers her voice, and says the words that ignite a firestorm. Those whispers weren't entirely false. Think about the weight of that statement. Not entirely false. Not a denial. Not a rejection. An admission, small, subtle, but enough to change everything. Now here's where the shift matters. Because for years, Doria's silence was her strength. It gave her credibility. When Thomas Markle spoke, people said, "Oh, he's bitter, he's cashing in." When Samantha Markle ranted, people said, "She's jealous, she wants attention." But when Doria finally spoke, people listened. They believed her. Why? Because Doria had nothing to gain. She wasn't chasing fame. She wasn't cashing in. She had been silent for years, the very picture of loyalty. And when someone like that speaks, even just a little, the world assumes it must be true. But let's ask the obvious question. Why now? Why break the silence now after so many years? Was it calculated? Was it an emotional slip? Or was it, perhaps, a warning? There are theories. Some suggest Doria was tired of carrying Meghan's secrets. Imagine being the one person who knows everything, who watches your daughter spin narratives, fight lawsuits, battle the press, all while knowing there's a truth buried underneath it all. That kind of weight breaks people eventually. Maybe Doria reached her breaking point. Others argue it was strategic. That Meghan and Doria planned it. That Meghan wanted to test the waters, to see how the public would react to such a revelation. If the reaction was manageable, maybe she'd control the narrative and reveal more later. If it was too explosive, Meghan could blame her mother's confused words and move on. And then there's a darker theory. That Doria has her own reasons for finally speaking out. That maybe, just maybe, mother and daughter aren't as united as they appear. That tensions have been brewing behind the scenes, and this was Doria's way of striking back, softly but effectively. Ask yourself, which theory do you believe? Was it loyalty slipping? Or rebellion simmering? Whatever the motive, the effect was the same. Doria's words cracked open a door Meghan had spent years sealing shut. And once that door was cracked, the media rushed in like a tidal wave. Headlines screamed across the world. Doria confirms Meghan rumors. Did Meghan hide a child? Talk shows replayed the clip on loop, dissecting every syllable, every facial expression, every pause. Body language experts appeared on screens, claiming Doria's tone suggested truth, not deflection. Royal commentators speculated what this meant for the monarchy, for Archie and Lilibet, for Harry's already crumbling relationship with his family. But let's look deeper at the psychology here. Doria had built a brand of silence. When she finally spoke, it wasn't just her words that mattered. It was the fact that she said anything at all. Silence broken is louder than any scream. And Meghan knew it. Reports suggest Meghan was furious when she heard what her mother had said. Furious because she understood better than anyone the power of Doria's credibility. Furious because, unlike Thomas or Samantha, Doria wasn't easy to dismiss. Meghan couldn't just say, "Oh, she's lying, she's jealous." This was her mother, her one loyal ally, the woman she had leaned on for decades. But here's where things get chilling. Once someone breaks silence once, what's to stop them from doing it again? That's what terrifies Meghan most. Because if Doria admitted the whispers weren't entirely false, what else might she admit under pressure? What else might slip out in a moment of weakness, or frustration, or truth-telling? And that brings us to the next turning point. Because while Meghan scrambled behind closed doors, drafting statements, calling lawyers, and demanding silence, the world was already moving on to the next question. Not just whether the rumors were true, but how the timeline of Meghan's life suddenly made a lot less sense. The gaps, the disappearances, the missing months, the sealed records. And once people started looking at that timeline with fresh eyes, the story shifted from gossip to investigation. Because if Doria's words were true, even partly true, then those gaps weren't coincidences. They were clues. And what came next was the painstaking unraveling of Meghan's life story, and the discovery that her timeline didn't add up. What happens when you start pulling on a loose thread? The fabric unravels. That's exactly what happened the moment people began re-examining Meghan Markle's life story. For years, her biography has been presented as a polished sequence. A smart, ambitious girl from Los Angeles, educated at Northwestern, hustling her way into Hollywood, landing her breakout role on Suits, then meeting Prince Harry. A clean, upward trajectory. But when you look closely, when you actually pull at those threads, you start to see something strange. Gaps, disappearances, months, even years, where her story doesn't quite add up. And once Doria Ragland admitted the whispers weren't entirely false, the timeline suddenly took on a whole new meaning. Every missing piece, every unaccounted-for period became suspicious. Every silence in her past started screaming. Let's start at the beginning. Meghan was born in 1981 in Los Angeles. Her childhood is well documented. Her mother Doria, her father Thomas, their eventual divorce, Meghan's time at private Catholic schools. She was a bright student, a driven teenager. Nothing scandalous, nothing unusual. But as Meghan grew older, cracks began to appear in her timeline. By the late 1990s, Meghan was juggling academics and social ambitions. She was known to have a string of relationships, some serious, some fleeting. Nothing unusual for a young woman. But there are whispers that during this time, something happened, something that would explain why she suddenly pulled back, why her focus shifted, why her relationship with certain friends and family soured. Now fast forward to her university years at Northwestern. Meghan majored in theater and international studies, an unusual but ambitious combination. She studied abroad in Argentina, worked at the U.S. Embassy in Buenos Aires. Impressive, right? But here's where the gaps begin. There are entire months where no one seems to know where Meghan was. Professors and classmates recall her being absent or unavailable without clear explanation. Friends who partied with her during breaks suddenly lost touch for weeks. Meghan herself later gave vague explanations in interviews, saying she was traveling, interning, or focusing on auditions. But none of it adds up neatly. Ask yourself, have you ever noticed how Meghan loves detail when it suits her narrative? She'll describe an exact meeting, an exact conversation, down to what someone was wearing. But when it comes to certain periods of her life, she suddenly becomes vague. No details, no stories, just a brush of the hand. Oh, I was traveling. Oh, I was figuring things out. Why so vague? What was she hiding? And here's where things get darker. Some claim that during one of these mysterious absences, Meghan was pregnant. That she quietly stepped away from school or work, vanished for several months, and then reappeared as if nothing had happened. And the child? That's where the rumors diverge. Some say adoption. Some say the child was raised quietly by someone close to Meghan. Some say tragedy. But the common thread is this. Meghan's life story doesn't fit together seamlessly. Let's take another example. Meghan's early Hollywood years. After graduation, she hustled hard, chasing acting roles. She was cast in commercials, small TV parts, background roles. The classic struggling actress story. But again, her timeline is patchy. There are long stretches between roles where she wasn't on set, wasn't auditioning, wasn't visible in the industry at all. People who knew her then recall sudden disappearances. Meghan was around, then she wasn't. She came back, and she didn't explain. Why does that matter? Because in Hollywood, people notice. Struggling actors don't just vanish for months without explanation. If you're not auditioning, you're waitressing. If you're not waitressing, you're networking. The grind never stops. Unless, of course, you have a reason you can't be seen. A reason you have to step away completely. And here's the thing. Meghan has always been meticulous about her narrative. She knows the importance of story. That's why the gaps are so suspicious. If she had nothing to hide, wouldn't she have filled them with anecdotes, stories, witty lines for interviews? Instead, those parts of her life remain a blur. But it gets even stranger when you factor in the sealed records. Several journalists have noted that certain legal and medical records tied to Meghan's past are unusually difficult to access. Court clerks refuse comment. Requests for information hit brick walls. Some documents appear to have been scrubbed entirely. Now, why would that be? Most people's early records are dull. School transcripts, medical notes, employment histories. But Meghan's? Off limits. And here's where speculation runs wild. What if those records hide the truth? A pregnancy, a birth certificate, legal paperwork connected to adoption or custody. It's impossible to know for certain, but the secrecy itself raises questions. Think about how hard Meghan has fought to control her narrative. Suing tabloids, battling newspapers, hiring teams of lawyers and PR experts. Most celebrities ignore gossip, let it fade. Meghan doesn't. Meghan fights. Ferociously. And why? Because she knows that sometimes, gossip isn't just gossip. Sometimes, gossip is a shadow of the truth. And Doria's words? They gave people permission to believe the rumors. Suddenly, those gaps in Meghan's timeline weren't just innocent lapses. They were evidence. They were breadcrumbs leading back to a story Meghan never wanted told. But here's the question that haunts this chapter. If Meghan's timeline really doesn't add up, then what exactly was she hiding during those missing years? The answer may lie not in her public life, but in her private one, in the sealed records, the family contradictions, and the strange silence that has always surrounded her. And the strangest silence of all comes not from Meghan, not from Doria, but from the people who knew her back then, classmates, friends, colleagues, who suddenly refused to talk. Why? What are they afraid of? What do they know that we don't? Because as the timeline unravels, one thing becomes clear. The missing years aren't just empty spaces. They're hiding something. And what happens when the very documents that could answer these questions are sealed, erased, or locked away forever? That's when suspicion turns into obsession. That's when the world demands answers Meghan cannot give. But the cracks in her timeline were only the beginning. Because soon, investigators discovered something even stranger. Sealed records tied to Meghan's past that suggested not just gaps, but deliberate cover-ups. And that's where the story explodes. Sealed records. Just the phrase alone sends a chill down your spine, doesn't it? It conjures images of dusty courtrooms, locked filing cabinets, and whispered conversations in back corridors. And when it comes to Meghan Markle, the story of sealed records has become one of the strangest, most unsettling pieces of this entire puzzle. Because if her timeline already raised eyebrows, the existence of blocked, hidden, or missing documents made suspicion impossible to ignore. Let's step into the world of investigative journalism for a moment. When reporters dig into public figures, they follow the paper trail. Birth certificates, school transcripts, property deeds, hospital records, legal filings. Most of these are public or at least accessible with some persistence. They're boring, routine documents. But when journalists began tracing Meghan's past, they kept slamming into walls. Birth records? Curiously difficult to track. Medical filings? Quietly sealed. Certain court documents? Unavailable. Even simple requests for background files led to silence or outright refusal. Now, why would that be? Why would records that should be harmless, routine, and unremarkable suddenly be off-limits? Some might argue privacy. Meghan, after all, is entitled to protect parts of her personal life. But here's the problem. Most celebrities don't go to such lengths. Most public figures don't have entire sections of their early history locked down tighter than state secrets. And it's not just a question of privacy. It's a question of consistency. Why are certain things freely available, like her school achievements, her Northwestern years, her acting credits, while other things are shrouded in mystery? It doesn't take a conspiracy theorist to see that something is wrong. Now let's talk about one of the most chilling whispers in this sealed records saga. Reporters claim that during Meghan's early 20s, documents were quietly sealed in California connected to what appeared to be a domestic matter. The specifics? Hidden. The access? Denied. Was it linked to family drama? Was it related to a medical event? Or was it, as some have dared to speculate, tied to the very rumors Doria Ragland would later reignite? Imagine for a moment that a birth certificate exists. Imagine that Meghan, in her early years, gave birth. That child's paperwork would exist somewhere, filed, recorded, logged. And if Meghan did not raise that child, if adoption or guardianship was involved, the documents would likely be sealed. Not destroyed, not erased, sealed, locked away by court order, invisible to the public. Now you see why journalists are so frustrated. It's not just about gossip. It's about a legal shadow hanging over Meghan's past. And shadows, when hidden, only grow darker. Here's another detail worth noting. In multiple instances, investigative reporters who tried to push these questions found themselves threatened with legal action. Not by Thomas Markle, not by estranged relatives, by Meghan's own legal team. Letters were sent, warnings delivered, careers threatened. Why fight so hard if there's nothing there? Why unleash the lawyers if it's all baseless speculation? And that brings us to the heart of the matter: control. Meghan has built her life on controlling the narrative. Her brand is her story. Every public appearance, every interview, every podcast has been carefully curated to present a version of herself she wants the world to see. Sealed records protect that story. They bury the cracks, erase the inconsistencies, and shield the parts of her past she doesn't want us to know. But Doria's slip changed everything. Remember what she said. Those whispers weren't entirely false. When you pair that with the existence of sealed records, it becomes damning. Suddenly, it's not just baseless gossip. Suddenly, it looks like evidence. Circumstantial, yes, but powerful enough to suggest there's truth buried under those seals. And let's talk about the family. Thomas Markle, for all his contradictions, once hinted at things he couldn't say. Samantha Markle, for all her venom, suggested Meghan's story wasn't as clean as it seemed. These statements, once dismissed as bitter ramblings, now look different. Now they sound like echoes of a truth hidden in those very sealed documents. Let me ask you directly. If there was nothing to hide, wouldn't Meghan and her team have simply opened the records? Wouldn't it be easier to prove the world wrong, to silence the gossip once and for all? Instead, they've chosen the opposite. Lock it down. Threaten journalists. Pretend the questions don't exist. But here's the irony. Secrecy breeds curiosity. The more you hide, the more people dig. The more you seal, the more people suspect. And Meghan, by trying to bury the past, may have given the rumors more life than they ever deserved. Now, Picture the palace in all of this. When Meghan first entered the royal family, you can bet MI5 and royal security combed through her background. They vet everything. Did they stumble upon sealed documents too? Did they ask questions Meghan refused to answer? And if they did, what kind of compromises or concessions were made to bring her into the fold anyway? This raises another chilling possibility. Did the royal family know about the whispers? Did they bury it too, to avoid scandal? Or did Meghan manage to hide it even from them? Either way, the idea of a duchess carrying a sealed secret of this magnitude would terrify the monarchy. And Doria's role? That's the wild card. Because if anyone knows the truth, it's her. She was there. She lived it. And her words, subtle but undeniable, cracked the wall Meghan has built. So here's where we stand. Sealed records, inaccessible files, missing pieces of Meghan's life, and a mother's admission that the rumors weren't entirely false. Taken together, it's a puzzle with too many missing pieces to ignore. And the question becomes, if the sealed records could speak, what would they say? Would they confirm the whispers? Would they prove the existence of a hidden child? Or would they reveal something even more shocking, something no one has yet considered? Because here's the danger. The truth is never destroyed. It's only buried. And buried truths have a way of clawing their way back to the surface. And claw back they did, through Meghan's own family. Because while Meghan fought to seal her records, her relatives began breaking their silence in public. And their betrayals would take the rumors to a whole new level. Family. It's supposed to be the one thing you can count on. The one fortress that protects you when the world is throwing stones. But for Meghan Markle, family has never been a fortress. It has been a battlefield. And when the whispers of a hidden child started resurfacing, her own blood poured gasoline on the flames. Let's set the stage. Meghan had spent years silencing the rumors. She leaned on her lawyers. She leaned on her PR machine. She leaned on silence. But the moment Doria Ragland cracked open the door with her words, those whispers weren't entirely false. Meghan's estranged family members saw an opportunity. An opening. A chance to have their say and twist the knife. First up, Thomas Markle. Meghan's father has always been a complicated figure. A man who walked her down red carpets as a child, who funded her education, who once adored his little girl. But also a man who now sits on the sidelines of her royal saga, bitter and disillusioned. He has spoken to the media countless times, painting Meghan as ungrateful, manipulative, cold. And when the whispers of a hidden child resurfaced, Thomas didn't deny them. He didn't protect his daughter. Instead, he added fuel. In one interview, Thomas said something chilling. There are things about Meghan's past I'll never talk about. Things she's desperate to keep hidden. He never elaborated. He never confirmed details. But he didn't need to. The implication was enough. Coming from her father, the man who raised her, the man who knew her best, those words carried weight. Ask yourself, if you were innocent of such a scandal, wouldn't your own father rush to defend you? Wouldn't he say, "That's nonsense, my daughter never had a hidden child"? Instead, Thomas Markle danced around the issue, leaving questions dangling in the air. And then there's Samantha Markle, Meghan's half-sister. Bitter, angry, relentless. Samantha has made a career out of tearing Meghan down. Her books, her interviews, her endless accusations, they've all painted Meghan as a master manipulator. And when the whispers came back to life, Samantha couldn't resist. She claimed Meghan's story had always been full of lies, that she created a fantasy narrative to cover her tracks. She even hinted, cruelly, that Meghan's obsession with controlling the story came from hiding something so explosive she could never let it see the light of day. Samantha never provided proof, but her words were venom designed to wound. And the public? They listened. Because Samantha's bitterness, while obvious, also made her sound fearless. She had nothing to lose. No royal titles. No contracts. No Netflix deals. She could say the things others wouldn't. But here's where it gets truly dangerous for Meghan. It wasn't just Thomas and Samantha. Other relatives began whispering too. Cousins, old acquaintances, people who once shared dinners and holidays with Meghan began leaking little details. Not outright confessions, not smoking guns, but enough to suggest that Meghan's past was full of strange gaps and stories that didn't add up. The family's betrayals weren't coordinated. They didn't need to be. Each little jab, each half hint, Each cruel comment chipped away at Meghan's defense. Because when your own blood keeps repeating the same insinuation, people start to believe. Now let's put ourselves in Meghan's shoes. Imagine you've worked your entire life to craft an image. The hardworking actress, the fairy tale duchess, the humanitarian mother of two. And now your father, your half-sister, your extended relatives are all standing in front of cameras suggesting you've been hiding something. How do you fight that? How do you silence them without proving their point? And what about Doria? Meghan's mother had always been her shield, her silent guardian. But now even Doria had slipped, suggesting the whispers weren't entirely false. For Meghan, it must have felt like betrayal from every angle. This is where Meghan's panic reportedly began. Sources close to her claimed she was frantic, desperate to shut down the narrative before it spiraled further. She leaned harder on her legal team. She demanded silence from Doria. She distanced herself even more from her father and sister. But the damage was done. The words were out there. And once they're out, you can't put them back in. Here's the irony. Meghan once claimed her family was toxic, jealous, manipulative. The world sympathized. People saw Thomas and Samantha as villains. But when their words suddenly lined up with Doria's subtle admission, the public began to wonder, were they really lying? Or had they been telling the ugly truth all along? Let's pause here. Think about the contradictions. Meghan's father saying there are things he can't say. Her sister claiming Meghan's life is a fantasy narrative. Doria hinting the whispers weren't false. These aren't isolated remarks. They're puzzle pieces. And when you put them together, they form a picture Meghan has been desperate to destroy. And the press? Oh, the press loved it. Headlines screamed. Talk shows debated. Royal commentators speculated. For years, Thomas and Samantha's words had been dismissed as bitter ramblings. But now, in light of Doria's statement, they felt like something else, corroboration. And that's what terrified Meghan most. Because the moment the world begins to see a pattern, the moment disparate voices start sounding like a choir, the story shifts from gossip to plausible truth. But the family betrayals were only part of the storm. Because while Thomas and Samantha were busy twisting the knife, Doria herself was about to become the center of attention again. And in her next appearance, she wouldn't just crack the facade, she would shatter it. There are moments in history where silence carries more power than words. And then, there are moments when silence shatters, and the words that spill out change everything. That was the case with Doria Ragland. For years, Doria was Meghan's greatest shield. She said nothing while Thomas Markle ranted. She refused to fuel tabloids when Samantha Markle published her cruel books. She never granted sit-down interviews for cash. She was Meghan's loyal mother, calm, dignified, and silent. But silence, as we know, has a weight. And eventually, even the strongest walls crack. The crack came at a public event. Doria had been invited to speak at what should have been an ordinary community gathering. The cameras weren't supposed to be predatory. The journalists weren't supposed to probe too deeply. But they did. One reporter, emboldened by the ever-growing storm of whispers about Meghan's hidden past, asked the question, "Mrs. Ragland, what do you say to those rumors about Meghan about a child?" The world seemed to freeze in that moment. Everyone expected Doria to do what she had always done, smile politely, dismiss it, walk away. But instead, she hesitated. A tiny pause, a mother caught between loyalty and truth. And then she said it. Those whispers weren't entirely false. 6 words. Just 6 words. But they were enough to ignite a global frenzy. Think about the weight of those words. Not "that's nonsense." Not "it's a lie." Not "my daughter has nothing to hide." Instead, Doria confirmed the existence of something. Maybe not the full story, maybe not the whole truth, but enough to suggest that the gossip had roots in reality. Let's break this down. First, her choice of words, not entirely false. That's not an accident. That's not a careless phrase. That's a hedging statement. It acknowledges there's something there, something true, something real. Otherwise, why not just deny it outright? Second, her tone. Body language experts who later analyzed the footage said her shoulders stiffened, her voice lowered, her eyes darted. This wasn't a rehearsed PR line. This was a slip, a raw moment of honesty. A mother revealing what she had spent years burying. Third, the timing. Doria chose, or slipped, at a moment when Meghan was already under scrutiny. Lawsuits, backlash, financial struggles, the royal ties growing weaker. The pressure was immense, and Doria cracked under it. And when she did, her words didn't just echo. They roared. Now here's where the story turns sinister. Because Meghan's entire empire rests on controlling her narrative. Her children, Archie and Lilibet, are part of that brand. Her image as a mother is central to every deal she makes. Netflix specials, podcasts, magazine covers. All of it sells the modern, authentic mother. So what happens when her own mother suggests Meghan's story of motherhood isn't as clean as it looks? It unravels. And Meghan knew it instantly. Reports claim she was furious when she saw the clip. Not just angry, panicked. Furious because Doria wasn't Thomas or Samantha. She wasn't bitter. She wasn't estranged. She wasn't easily discredited. She was Meghan's last loyal ally. And now she had spoken words Meghan couldn't take back. The fallout was immediate. Within hours, headlines exploded. Doria confirms Meghan rumors. Hidden child story reignites. Mother's words shake the palace. News outlets replayed the clip on loop. Talk shows debated endlessly. Analysts dissected the phrase like it was a state secret. But here's the cruel twist. The more Meghan tried to contain the damage, the worse it got. If she ignored it, people said she was hiding. If she denied it, people said she was panicking. If she attacked the media, people said she was deflecting. Every move backfired. And Doria? She went quiet again. No clarifications. No retractions. No press release. Just silence. Which made it worse. Because if it was a slip, why not correct it? Why not say, I misspoke, it's false? Instead, Doria disappeared, leaving the world to believe her first words were the truth. Now let's ask the obvious question. What exactly did Doria mean? Option 1. She was confirming Meghan had a hidden child, but only hinting because she couldn't bear to say it outright. Option 2. She was referencing something less dramatic, perhaps a miscarriage, a failed adoption, or an estranged relationship. Option 3. She deliberately chose ambiguous words to protect Meghan while still releasing the truth. Which do you believe? Because no matter which option you choose, one fact remains. Meghan's image is cracked. A mother's words carry more weight than any rumor, more power than any tabloid. And Doria's words didn't just crack the facade. They shattered it. But here's where the cliffhanger lies. Meghan wasn't the only one panicking. Behind the gilded walls of Buckingham Palace, the royals were watching too. They had welcomed Meghan into their family, into their history, into their bloodline. And now the possibility of a hidden child, confirmed by her mother, raised terrifying questions for the monarchy itself. What would it mean for the legitimacy of Archie and Lilibet? What would it mean for succession? For reputation? For the monarchy's fragile image? The royals were about to face their own reckoning, and their reaction would prove just as shocking as Doria's words. The world didn't just hear Doria Ragland's words, it devoured them. Within minutes, those 6 little words, those whispers weren't entirely false, were ripped from the moment and plastered across headlines, dissected on talk shows, and spread like wildfire across social media. This wasn't just a comment. This was dynamite. And the media eruption that followed was unlike anything Meghan Markle had faced since her royal wedding. Picture it. CNN runs a banner. Doria Ragland confirms Meghan rumors. Fox News declares. Meghan's mother speaks out. Hidden child story explodes. The Daily Mail posts grainy close-ups of Doria's expression as she made the remark, alongside sensational speculation about what she really meant. Talk shows in the US and the UK lined up body language experts to analyze every blink, every shrug, every pause. Suddenly, it wasn't just gossip. It was a full-blown international scandal. And here's the thing about media frenzies. They don't stay contained. Once the big outlets bite, smaller publications swarm. Blogs, tabloids, YouTube channels, TikTok creators. All of them rushed to offer their takes. Everyone wanted a slice of the scandal pie. And in that chaos, fact and speculation blended into one giant storm. Think about the hashtags that started trending. Hashtag Hidden Markle Child. Hashtag Doria Speaks. Hashtag What is Meghan Hiding? Everywhere you looked, people weren't just asking questions. They were demanding answers. And the media didn't stop at reporting. They went digging. Old interviews with Meghan resurfaced, where she had dodged personal questions. Former classmates and acquaintances were hunted down by reporters. Paparazzi swarmed Montecito, desperate to catch Meghan looking rattled. Photos of Meghan from her younger years were plastered online, examined for signs of pregnancy, of weight gain, of anything that could be spun into evidence. Here's what made it worse. The palace was watching. And when the palace watches, the media takes it as a green light. Suddenly, royal correspondents were weighing in. If true, one said, this could have enormous implications for the monarchy. That line was repeated endlessly. And what about Meghan herself? The frenzy put her in a no-win situation. If she spoke up, she'd fuel the fire. If she stayed silent, she'd look guilty. The media capitalized on that tension, keeping her trapped in a cycle where every move she made became proof of something sinister. But Meghan wasn't the only one in the spotlight. Doria was suddenly the center of it all. Her face was everywhere, her name trending worldwide. Reporters camped outside her home. Friends and neighbors were hounded for comments. The press dissected her entire life, her relationships, her history, searching for clues about what else she might know. And the commentary was brutal. Some praised Doria as courageous for finally breaking her silence. Others accused her of betrayal, painting her as the mother who sold her daughter out. But regardless of opinion, one fact remained. Doria's credibility was unshakable. Unlike Thomas or Samantha Markle, she wasn't bitter, estranged, or desperate for money. Her silence for decades had given her words enormous power. Meanwhile, the conspiracy theories exploded. Was the child living somewhere in California? Was it raised in secret? Did the royals know? Was this why Meghan and Harry had left the UK so abruptly? Every question fed another headline, another viral post, another late-night comedy punchline. And the more the media fanned the flames, the more the public demanded answers. Polls were run. Did people believe Meghan had a hidden child? Shockingly, a significant portion of respondents said yes. Public opinion was turning. Here's the devastating part. For Meghan, this wasn't just a PR crisis. This was an existential threat. Because the media frenzy wasn't just about scandal, it was about trust. Her brand was authenticity. Her entire career post-royalty was built on being the woman who spoke her truth. And now, her own mother's words suggested she had buried the biggest truth of all. And once the media smelled blood, they didn't stop. They went back to the gaps in Meghan's timeline. They hunted for sealed documents. They replayed Thomas Markle's cryptic comments. They quoted Samantha Markle's bitter jabs. Every scrap of gossip suddenly became evidence. But the most dangerous turn came when royal insiders began speaking off the record. They hinted at private concerns within Buckingham Palace. They suggested that Meghan's past had always been a delicate subject. And when those whispers made it into the press, the narrative shifted again. This wasn't just about Meghan's brand. It was about the monarchy itself. Imagine the palace reading those headlines. Hidden child could disrupt succession. Imagine the panic behind closed doors. Imagine the fury from King Charles, the unease from Prince William, the quiet calculations of courtiers wondering what this would mean for Archie and Lilibet. And that's where the cliffhanger lands. Because while the media whipped itself into a frenzy, the world waited for one response. Not from Meghan, not from Doria, but from the palace. How would the royals react to the possibility that Meghan's mother had just confirmed a scandal that could rock the monarchy to its very core? Their reaction was about to leak, and it would shock everyone. Meghan Markle has always thrived on control. Control of her image, her narrative, her version of events. It's what made her interviews compelling, her Netflix series watchable, her podcasts carefully scripted. But control is fragile. And the moment her mother, Doria Ragland, uttered those 6 fateful words, those whispers weren't entirely false. Control shattered. What happened next was fury. Not quiet disappointment. Not calculated calm. Fury. Imagine Meghan in Montecito, scrolling through her phone, seeing the headlines scream across every screen. Doria confirms hidden child. Meghan's secret past revealed. Palace concerned over Ragland's statement. Her hands shaking, her face tightening, her phone lighting up with calls from lawyers, PR managers, friends, and maybe even Harry himself, panicked in his own way. But Meghan's fury wasn't just at the media. It was at her mother, her one loyal ally, her shield. Doria was never supposed to break, and yet she had. Reports from so-called insiders claimed Meghan called her mother within hours of the scandal erupting. The conversation, they said, was tense. Furious whispers, raised voices. Meghan allegedly accused her mother of betrayal. Doria, rattled, retreated into silence again. But the damage was already done. So Meghan did what Meghan always does. She went into battle mode. Step 1. Lawyers. Within 24 hours, Meghan's legal team was drafting cease and desist letters. Journalists who printed the word confirmed in connection to Doria's statement received warnings. Tabloids were threatened with lawsuits. Online commentators were reminded of the legal consequences of defamation. Meghan's lawyers knew they couldn't erase Doria's words, but they could make it dangerous to repeat them. Step 2. PR. Meghan's team scrambled to spin the story. They reached out to sympathetic journalists, framing Doria's words as a misunderstanding. They suggested she had been misquoted, taken out of context, manipulated by the press. They insisted she was speaking metaphorically, not literally. But the problem? There was video. The footage was clear. The words were unmistakable. No matter how much spin her team applied, people had already heard them for themselves. Step 3. Silence. Meghan disappeared. No public appearances. No interviews. No Instagram posts. She pulled Harry into the bunker with her, both of them ducking the storm. The absence was strategic. If they didn't add fuel, maybe the fire would burn out. But in the modern media age, silence doesn't kill stories. It feeds them. And here's the irony. Meghan's fury, her frantic damage control, only made her look guilty. Every legal thread, every PR statement, every act of silence screamed panic. And the media devoured it. Headlines shifted from Doria confirms rumors to Meghan in meltdown. But Meghan wasn't just fighting the media. She was fighting Harry. Because for Harry, the scandal was a nightmare of another kind. He had spent years defending Meghan against his family, against the press, against the public. And now, her own mother had thrown a grenade into the middle of their lives. Behind closed doors, Harry was said to be conflicted, furious at the press for seizing on Doria's words, but also shaken. Because if Doria was hinting at truth, what did that mean about the woman he had left everything for? The tension between Meghan and Harry reportedly grew. Meghan demanded loyalty. Harry demanded honesty. Their home in Montecito became less a sanctuary, more a pressure cooker. And the world watched, waiting for cracks. But the real cracks were appearing not in Montecito, but in London. Because while Meghan raged in California, the palace remained silent. No statement. No denial. Just silence. And that silence was deafening. It fueled speculation that the royals knew more than they were saying. That maybe, just maybe, they had been aware of the whispers all along. And this is what drove Meghan's fury to new heights. She wasn't just fighting the media anymore. She was fighting the creeping suspicion that the palace was letting her twist in the wind on purpose. Was it revenge? Payback for Oprah? Retribution for Netflix? Meghan didn't know. But the silence from London was louder than any headline. Meanwhile, her critics were celebrating. Samantha Markle gleefully gave interviews, calling Meghan's silence proof. Thomas Markle repeated his cryptic lines about things I can't say. Former acquaintances were tracked down, some hinting at odd disappearances in Meghan's past. Each word added to Meghan's fury. Each story dug the hole deeper. Let's pause here and ask the audience directly. If you were Meghan, what would you do? Keep fighting? Keep denying? Or would you finally come clean, whatever the truth may be? Because Meghan faced a choice, double down on the lies, or risk revealing the truth. And in her fury, she chose the path she always had. Fight harder, fight louder, fight until the other side breaks. But this time, her fury was met with something new, royal silence. And the palace's silence wasn't weakness. It was strategy, because behind those walls, discussions were happening. Urgent discussions. Panic discussions. Discussions about what Doria's words really meant, and what it could mean for the monarchy if the whispers turned out to be true.